Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name is Chris. Next to me here is the frame from a 1964 Triumph TR4 that I'm restoring. Finally putting the front suspension back together, and if all goes according to this plan in this video, it'll be done on this side. Thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. If you watched my last video, which you can link at up here, you'll notice that the vertical link is gone. Pretty easy process to pull it back out because I didn't really get committed on the upper ball joint there, nor did I put any oil in here, thankfully. Had a couple comments in my last video about installing the vertical link and how far to screw it down. A couple people pointed out that the workshop manual for the TR6 and I think the TR3s, and I know the Spitfire, tells you how far to screw it in before you get it seated properly and bring it back out. The TR4 workshop manual, I could not find where it said that. So I screwed it in without the rubber seal. I got about 19 turns or so, 18 and a half, 19 turns or something like that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill this with oil this time. I'll show you what I'm going to use. I'm going to screw it down, put the seal on it. I'm going to screw it down that number of turns and put this thing back together. I figure I'm confident now that this will stay like this, so I can go ahead and put the oil in. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue assembly. So here's the oil I'm going to use. This is Brad Penn 80/90 gear weight oil. This is GL4 stuff. GL4 specifically formulated to not harm the yellow metals, unlike more modern stuff that doesn't have the protect. It either doesn't have protectants in it or it has stuff that degrades the yellow metal. I'm not sure which is what, but I picked this up from the Rotor factory a long time ago. So there's just a little bit in here. So I'm going to go ahead and pour some in. I don't really know how much to pour in. I guess I'll figure it out when it starts leaking out all over the place. And we'll go ahead and pour that in there. And then I'm going to start, like I mentioned, to screw that vertical link down as far as I can. And then back it out until it's straight and in a proper position. And then we'll put it back together. So it doesn't take much oil in here at all. It's almost like you're greasing it where you're just essentially coating the surfaces. Because obviously you've only got the difference in the threads in here. And everything else is going to be displaced by metal. So you put too much oil in, it's just going to spill out anyway, which is essentially what happened to me. But now that I got it to essentially I filled it up maybe a quarter of the way, let it overflow, screwed it all the way down, let it overflow all the way up, all over the place on me, clean that up, and now I'm putting it in for good now. Don't forget your rubber seal. And we're going to go and screw it in until it fully seats, and it's going to crush that rubber seal like I showed you in the last video, which is fine. Just watch your spring as you're tightening it. Don't smack your stub link or stub axle into your spring. So right about here, right about there is as far as it goes. So now I'm going to back it all the way out until I get right about the right spot. And I think that's probably about where I was anyway, but that'll keep it. So that's nice and loose in there, or nice and rotatable, I guess. And we'll go ahead and put the steering lock on there just so I don't lose stuff. And we'll go ahead and put the upper ball joint back in there again. I'm not going to go gronking on it. We'll go ahead and get that tightened up, and then time to start putting the front back together. Going to start assembling the hub now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the brake caliper attachment on and the dust shield for the brakes. This is one of those where you got to wonder what's in Triumph's head. The steering arm also goes on here. It goes from the back. There's 4 bolts that go in here. The 2 top ones are through bolts, and they get secured with nylock nuts and spacers to the steering arm. The bottom 2 are threaded, but this one, even though it's threaded, goes through, it gets a nylock nut, because that nylock nut picks up this little tab here on the dust cover. And then this one here is just through with a 3/4 inch bolt, and that just secures up. 4 different bolts, 4 different sizes. A 3, a 3.5, a 3/4, and like a 1 3/8 is what the workshop manual calls for. But since you can't find those 1/8 inch, or at least I can't, I went with a 1.5 inch. The brake caliper goes towards the back, so you got to get that lined up right. These are painted, obviously, so that's a little sticky. You also have lock tabs. The trick with the lock tabs is, you can see, I think, how those are curved. I just took a little piece of pipe and just kind of nailed it or hammered it around the pipe. If these are perfectly flat, they don't fit. They're too far, the holes are too far apart. So you just got to kind of pay attention there and make sure, don't freak out like I did the first time it doesn't fit and thought somebody sent me the wrong part. So we'll go ahead, get the 3/4 inch going here. 1.5 inches coming through the bottom. Again, this is threaded. Or excuse me, 1.5 inches. What did I say? 3.5, I meant 1.5 inches. And then you got the 3 and your 3.5. So there's the steering arm. Steering arm is going to fit like this, where the hole is going to go towards the front to pick up the steering linkage, obviously. So when you put that in, I'll get you a better camera angle here. So we've got the bolts kind of laying in there ready to go. The 3.5 inch, the longer one, goes in the front. So we're going to push that through, and it gets a little spacer on it. 3 inch goes in the back. Also push that through, and it's got a spacer on it. And then again, the steering arm is going to kind of go in like this, and it clears around the vertical link with all these spacers. And then that gets secured with nylock nuts. So we'll get those finger tight, and I forgot the lock tab in the front. So that's how that goes. No problems there. We'll go ahead and get this all tightened up, and then we'll also kind of sneak the brake dust shield on there. I'll pull you around and show you that. All right, so like I said, this bolt is going to go ahead and pick up as it screws in and gets fully inserted. That's going to go ahead and pick up these tabs. Essentially the brake dust, the brake thing. Kind of a little bit of a puzzle here. So pretty much like that. And then when the caliper comes on, the caliper is going to fit in between all this and bolt on. Now, I'm not ready to put the calipers on yet, but I should be able to get this thing screwed down a little bit here. So we'll go ahead and we'll get it tighten everything up. I got a little bit of concern for this bolt down here. We'll see if it comes to fruition or not, and I'll explain that to you what's up when I get to that point, if I get to that point. So this is that 1.5 inch bolt that I was talking about that secures the back of this brake caliper. You can see that little gap in there. The problem is that now I'm bottomed out in the shoulder, and there's no more way I can screw it in any further because I ran out of threads on the bolt itself. So looking at how much is protruding from the back, probably could have gone with 1.25 inches instead of 1.5 inch bolt here, and assuming the shoulder would be different for that, it might have done better. You can get a full threaded bolt, I guess, so that doesn't call for that, but I'm sure that would be okay. But otherwise, I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is just cut more threads into it. I only need 2 or 3 more threads, and just go from there. Point something out real quick. These bolts are gone to 32 to 35 foot-pounds, so I've done 3 of them. The one I'm going to do now is the bottom one where it's threaded and there's a nylock nut on the back. Now, I'm not worried about the torque on the nylock nut because all that's doing is just holding this dust shield, but I am worried about this torque. And since it's threaded, I'm going to torque the bolt here to the 32 to 35 foot-pounds. I'm not going to worry about torquing the nylock nut. Again, I'll get it tight, but I'm not going to torque it because that's not the tension bearing connection. It's this guy threaded in to the caliper housing. All right, so all 4 of those are torqued. As I often do, I'm going to wait on bending over the tabs. Now, hopefully, I can get this dust shield in here a little bit better. Go ahead and get a 9/16 on that nylock nut in the back here. Get this tightened up so this dust shield fits nicely. So that's nice and snug. Dust shield is fitting on there pretty well. And again, the caliper, like I mentioned, kind of comes in here and gets pinched, and there's threads here. So the threads will come, the bolts will come back from the back end of the caliper and tighten in. Now, my calipers are a hot mess. I haven't rebuilt them yet, so I'm not going to worry about putting them on. So now I got that, and we'll start continuing to move out and build up the hub. I'm going to be building the hub now, so I obviously got that guy all nice and painted up. There's bearings that are in here, both the inner and the outer bearings and the races. And there's also this big heavy-duty felt seal. I picked this up new from British Parts Northwest. I haven't ordered stuff from them in a while. But they also got my brake rotors that I was looking for. So the first thing we got to do here is put the races in. Now, probably I didn't have to replace these. They didn't look too bad. Here's the old ones here. There's some marks on them, but I wouldn't say anything that's scoring. Definitely can't catch anything on my finger. But, you know, what the heck. I was able to pick up Timken races and Timken bearings, so I will put the model numbers and everything that I used in the description. I don't remember how much one side cost me. I'll throw that up in the bottom of the screen real quick for the whole kit and caboodle, but I'll tell you, it's not real cheap ordering it from ordering the same exact stuff from the parts warehouses. But first thing we got to do is press these bearings in. So you've got, I'm going to do the whole socket trick and get a socket of pretty much similar size as the race, but smaller than the inner portion, so I can press it down. And I've got that super lube stuff I'm going to use as a lubricant in there. So we'll get over to the press and we'll get these races pressed in. Got the hub here. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. I did put the races in the freezer to try to help me a little bit. So we'll see if that really matters. I'm just going to knock it in with a piece of wood and a hammer here just to help me get going. All right, so we got that started. And I forgot the other one. So we got those nice and level and started. I'd rather that than them go in crooked. So now we'll get over to the press and finish them up and make sure they're fully seated. Got the brake rotors here. I picked these up from British Parts Northwest as well. Can't remember how much they were, 40 or 50 bucks, 55 bucks, something like that each. So not real cheap, but they are TRWs. So I wanted something a little bit better quality. They are not cut or drilled or anything like that. I think that's a total waste unless you're racing. So, of course, some can argue that I've wasted money on other areas like the uprated stub axles when I'm not racing, but pound-wise, penny foolish, whatever you want to call it. But it is painted, so it won't rust horribly, except for obviously the surfaces where you have the brake rotor go. So these should be pretty good. Set this aside. So obviously that needs to get bolted to the hub. So we got the hub here. Put that down. Put the rotor on top. Just lines up. And for these I got grade 8 bolts. These look about 3/4, maybe they're 1 inch. Grade 8 just because I figure this is one where you might want a little extra oomph. The kicker with this is you got to get the brake rotor on before you fully assemble the hub, because it's not like modern brakes where you can pull it out from the front of the car and easily swap out. If you want to swap your brake rotors, you got to totally disassemble the front hub. So let me go ahead and get these tightened down. We'll figure out the torque and I'll be back. So it's pretty tough to get the to really grab onto the rotor, obviously, because it's round, and get the torque required, which is about 35 foot-pounds on these bolts here. So what I learned to do on the Spitfire is essentially get the hub on here, put some lug nuts, or in this case, this is the wire wheel nuts on there, and get those flat set up on the vise so you're not bearing directly onto the threads of the wheel studs. Tighten that down a little bit, and then that'll prevent it from turning. You're going to put a lot of torque on this, so you want to make sure that vise is relatively tight, because if this thing comes rolling out of here on you, it's either going to hurt or potentially damage something or whatever. So make sure that you're confident in this and kind of take your time. And I'm going to tighten these just like I tighten wheel lugs on a car. I'm not going to walk the torque up, but I'm just going to kind of go by feel so that they're nice and flat. And like I mentioned, what I'm worried about is these rusting out. So I'm going to get some fluid film and spray it on the bare metal parts. Now I know that's probably something that might not be advisable, because obviously you're putting now stuff on your rotors that could be potentially impacting the brake performance. Well, before I put any pads anywhere near this thing, I will wipe it down and spray it down and everything else with Brake Clean, the red stuff, not the green stuff, so that I won't have to worry about that. So we're going to get some fluid film just on a rag and wipe this down so that it hopefully protects some of it. And like I showed you, it's painted, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Got the bearings packed with the Timken red grease. I used this guy right here, and frankly I had to kind of reteach myself how to do it, so I did not film it. Apologize for that. I'm sure there's 50 million videos out there on YouTube that'll show you how to do that much better than I could. But now we are ready to take the brake caliper and hub, get over to the car, and remember I got the new stub axles, so that's another thing I got to worry about here. And then we'll get this all fit up, and hopefully it'll spin nice and smooth. A little bit of a step back here. So I failed to read the installation instruction for the uprated spindles before I greased everything. And essentially it wants you to remove as much of the grease as you can. so it doesn't interfere with the measurements that we're going to take, because this thing gets shimmed and everything. I guess the idea here is to get essentially no play in the bearings at all, but that it'll still rotate freely, and they give you a bag full of shims of varying thicknesses, and you essentially line it up so that it's just exactly the spacer and all that stuff, just exactly take up all that space, and the bearings can still spin, but you don't get any wobbling. So the instructions say to essentially remove everything, clean it all up, and then put it back in, including the felt seal. Now, it does not tell you to put the felt seal back on at this point, so to put in the inner cone bearing. And this one goes on there, and then that cone spacer, this guy right here, that goes in, and then the hub, which I got right here. And then the first shim it tells you to put in is 0.015 or 15 thousandths, so we'll get that guy on. Then the D-washer, or excuse me, then the inner bearing. And then the D-washer right there. And then the castellated nut. So now we got that tightened up, and what it says now is you torque it to 50 foot-pounds and then try to spin the rotor, and it should spin freely. And then you take the rotor itself and you kind of wiggle it around and everything and make sure you're not getting anything, any play or anything. And essentially the idea here is to get the smallest shim pack that you can put in there and get thinner and thinner shims until you get to the point where you get to 50 foot-pounds. You can still torque it to that, and it'll still spin freely without any play in the rotor itself. Eventually, I assume, you know, I go too thin on the spacers and it's going to lock up. So it says that the average person, or most people, report about 7 thousandths thickness here to get to be able to do that. So again, like I mentioned, I've got a various amount of shims in there. So a lot of iterations here. I'm not going to bore you with all the iterations, but we'll torque this nut down to 50 foot-pounds, try and spin it, and then we'll just keep doing that, taking it apart, changing the shims out until I get to the point where it works. I'll be back and show you what I get when I get there. So we got the iterations done here, and we're looking at about 6.5 thousandths, something like that. It's just about where they said the typical person finds it right. So now we're just going to build the bearing back up now with all the greasy stuff. So we got the felt seal, and the felt seal, the metal goes out. That's what the bearing sits on. Inner bearing here. Now the hub. Oh, no, actually, not the hub. The big spacer and the shims, or the shim, and they ended up using one. And the hub. And I have a feeling it's not going to spin as nicely because that felt seal is going to get compressed a little bit. So we'll see how that goes. So we got that assembled. I'm going to torque it up to 50 foot-pounds, check it, make sure it still rotates freely. Compressing the felt seal right now. There we go. That's 50 foot-pounds. It's definitely tight. But I think as the felt seal wears itself in, that's going to be okay. So it's something to keep an eye on, definitely. But I think I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to pull that back off. I'm going to bend those tabs over, put the hub back on, torque it back down to the 50 foot-pounds, and we'll carry on from there. All right, everybody, that's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Well, that's how I did it. Obviously, still some loose ends to tie up here, which I'll worry about once I get the chassis back on the ground. I'll probably get the motor and the gearbox in there. But that's one way to skin that cat. So we'll move over to the other side, get that wrapped up, and then continue on with populating the chassis. Thanks again for watching. Likes, comments, subscriptions, all that stuff. I appreciate you guys. Keeps me motivated. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.